Hi, my name's Katie, and if we haven't met before, I'm a life model and I've done a few classes now online. This is a short video of a few tips and tricks that might help you if you've done some life drawing classes, or maybe you haven't yet but you're considering doing some from home. Today I'm going to look at thinking about the most reliable tech that you've got, planning how to use your space, marketing and safety considerations, and finally setting up and preparing for a life drawing class from home. So every life drawing class that I've attended so far has been on Zoom. There are some differences, but across the board this is what people are using. So what you want to figure out is what you have at home that works the best, gives the best visual, and is the most reliable on Zoom. The best way I've found to figure this out is to set up a call with a friend, and then you can use all the different tech that you've got at home and see what gives the best visual. So for me, at my home, I've got my phone, my partner's phone, and a couple of laptops. And what I did was set up a call with somebody with no pressure, no real time limit, and just one by one, just test them all out so they could see what looked best. When I figured out the best one, that's the one I then settled with, and that's the one that I always use in life drawing classes. So taking your time to do a really good setup check and also check your internet connection will pay off, and do this way before the first class that you do. You want to make sure that that first class goes really nice and smoothly, that there's no tech issues, the internet streams beautifully. That's going to give you a really good first impression. You're going to get booked more. You're also probably going to get recommended as well. Also, a couple of tips about this. So my preference for the life drawing that I do at home, I'm very lucky and I negotiate when I use my partner's Mac. That's got the best quality visual by far of all the tech that I've got at home. I'm also pretty lucky that I've got pretty standard, pretty decent internet connection. But one thing you could do if you do feel like the internet might be a bit patchy for yourself, first off, test it through a Zoom call that doesn't matter, like with a friend, and secondly, just see what other things are being run on that internet. So if you've got a household with a few people, you might want to ask them to not upload or stream movies during the couple of hours that you're doing a life drawing class. You just want to make sure that everything is as level and reliable as possible. Number 2 is thinking about planning how to use your space at home. So what you're going to want to do is see the best place for life modelling and the most consistent place as well. I always use this wall, and I happen to have a green screen. It's really just green fabric that I put down, and it means that I'm really clear and my limbs are nice and clear, and any props that I use are usually really clear as well. So I personally think that a plain backdrop works pretty well. I've got some lights here that I'm using, but a really important point, and we'll talk about lighting later, is that if you're relying on natural light, then you need to just have a bit of a check, again, way before a life drawing class, to figure out how the light is coming in through the day. As well as choosing a backdrop that gives a really good contrast to your hair and skin tone, it's also really important to think about the lights that you're using. So you might be lucky, you might have some studio lights, or you might be considering getting some, but they are far superior to using lamps and little lights that you might have at home. The reason why is that these are just so much more powerful and they give a lot better throw of light. When we're in a life drawing class in real life, you can use lots of lamps and our eyes seem to pick it up a lot better. When we start playing around with the lights, you'll see as well that this camera is adjusting to the light as well. When it's really bright like this, I've got 2 and 1 to either side of me, it's very, very stable, it doesn't change. But when we start changing the light or using less light, or maybe something that's not as strong as these lights, like a lamp, the technology seems to struggle with that a bit, and sometimes it can make the image like flicker a little bit or just a little bit harder to see. So the lights that I've got, at either side, I have one positioned here, one positioned there. I find that really useful to have 2. 2 means that A, it's really strong, it's really bright. This means it's stable all day, all night. It doesn't matter if I do a life drawing class in my morning, or, you know, considering that we're doing them on different time zones as well, it doesn't matter if I'm doing it late at night. It still looks exactly the same with every single class. I've also got the options that I can turn lights on and off, and that gives me really good shadow. So what I'll do is I'll just show you quickly the different light setups. So this is that one off. This is this one off. So this is now the natural light that's coming through, quite a big window that I've got over there. You can already see it's getting really dark, and sometimes, depending on where I'm moving, the camera can sometimes flicker a bit with that light and it doesn't always like it. And I'll just put this one back on. So again, can be really helpful if you want shadow, so more than one light can be really good. If you don't have a light like this at home, you don't have a studio light, because you know not everyone would, it is quite random, it is worth maybe investing. And we've kind of figured out that looking online you can get a continuous softbox light with the tripod for about £60. So if this situation continues for a while, and actually life drawing from home and virtual life drawing might continue anyway, because it's a great way for people to do it if they can't get to a class, you are likely to get your money back. £60 is hefty, but a few classes should pay that off. I'll show you the light so you can see it. This is going to be really bright in the video, so please bear with me because the camera's going to adjust suddenly to all of this light, and I might turn this one on too. There we go. So the light that I've got is adjustable, so actually I think that's really good. So I can move it, so if I'm doing a standing pose I can have it quite high up, if I'm sat down I can lower it, and it's got this umbrella as well, so I can turn it around. I can have it really, really bright on me, like with a big contrast, or I can soften it by just turning it around so the light's not hitting me as strong. So lighting is hugely important. I would say it's good to invest in it, and it's really good as well, have a play, find out what looks the best on a visual screen, because what looks good to the eye doesn't always replicate or translate so well on screen. So it's all about the setup, all about experimenting, and I guess lighting practice makes perfect. Next, you're going to be thinking about how to fit your body into the background and also into the little screen that you're going to be appearing in. So it's likely that you're going to be doing a mix of standing poses and also poses that are lower to the ground. You might also be doing poses that include some foreshortening and is a little bit different to figure out than when you're doing it intuitively in real life. Best thing to do, have a conversation before the class to figure out exactly what's expected of you. Again, way ahead so you know, so you can prepare whereabouts you're going to sit and position the camera so you can fit yourself in. I'm filming this video on a smartphone, so it looks a little bit different, but where you are right now is exactly where I put my Mac to make sure that I've got a really clear, and it is more cropped in a visual of the green screen. The main thing is that every time I put my Mac exactly where you are now, I know that my whole body can fit in, and I can also move my limbs around and it will all be in the shot. This is going to be slightly different again because I'm filming on a smartphone, but this position here is the same place that I always put the Mac when I'm going to be doing poses that are lower to the ground. So every time I've got a class, I know it's exactly over there for standing and here for seated, and that means that A, I'm well prepared, and it also means that I can move really quickly if needed from pose to pose, and I have it all planned out. It's the same place. If you have natural markers like I do, then you can just put them there, but you could always put a little bit of tape where you know roughly where you need to put your tech, so you don't end up cutting out any limbs when you're moving, because you want to just make the transitions as easy for you as possible. It's also really nice to prepare for the life drawing classes by pulling into the space that you're going to model with some different objects that you use from home. Because life drawing is not really as spontaneous when it's online. You are restricted by the box in which you fit in. So it's nice to have some things that you know that you can do more interesting poses with, and you can also practice the poses as well with the items to check that when you do it you're not losing a foot or losing a hand. I like to have a few different seating options that I know roughly, like if I sit on this then I know that I might cut my head off. You know, I like to just roughly know how I'm going to fit on the screen. It gives me a little bit of diversity with my pose, it makes it a bit more interesting, and yeah, it's always really good to know how I'm going to fit in the box with other objects. Number 3 is preparing poses. So I just talked a little bit earlier about how you might want to prepare with the props, but in general you're going to want to know some poses as well. It is a little bit of a stranger experience life drawing. Firstly, for me, I've never modelled with a little virtual nude screen of myself, so my first class I had to get used to sort of obviously seeing a version of me that people were drawing, but I was sitting opposite it. So it's, it's a little bit different, and you do get your head around it, but the more that you kind of prepare yourself, the more that you'll be feeling more confident when you do a class. So practice your poses, roughly work out what you can do where you know that you're not going to be missing a bit of limb, what's going to be really comfortable as well. It just doesn't necessarily feel as natural yet, so the transition to pose is a bit weird. Back in the old days in the real world, you might have had a circle around you or people around you, so you kind of could do what you wanted and they would be able to see it, but you do have to constantly think of yourself being in this little rectangle. So every time that you can, just practice the poses. You'll know roughly what looks good on the full length and what looks better when the camera's up close to you. Point number 4 is marketing yourself and safety considerations. So things that I've found really helpful when I've marketed myself is all in the preparation. I've taken some time to take a couple of pictures, whether that's on my phone timer or to get someone else to take them for me, of me in the setup in seated pose or standing pose. That means that when I have contacted some classes, I can show them really quickly a visual of what it looks like so they can envision it and work out what it might be like to book me. That's been really helpful. The second point is more about safety and security. So you need to really think about what you feel most comfortable with. Life drawing online is very different to the real world. You are being streamed online, and whilst the community is by large really great, there's always an element of risk. This is what makes it a bit different. Really, really great classes are going to be there looking out for this. So generally they're going to know the people that are coming, and also on Zoom you can see if people are drawing. So you might want to request that people's cameras are showing, because then you can see whether they're drawing or if they're not. The other thing that I found really helpful for myself is that I haven't marketed myself in advance of a class. I have if I've been clothed, but if I've been nude, I just don't publicise it until afterwards. I've just found that for me, it just makes me feel a little bit more comfortable about it. But ultimately, the main thing is that you stay safe and you stay comfortable. It's a different world and it's an amazing world, but for the model it does bring different risks, and it's worth considering that and what you're happy to do and what you're happy with, whether it's recorded sessions, clothed sessions, nude sessions, however they run. You want to know what you're happy with before you go into a class, and also just talk to the tutor and make it really clear that you know what's expected of you, just so there's no confusions. Finally, just some thoughts about preparing for a class. So I'm somebody that does rush around a little bit, but I've really found it helpful to set myself at least 30 minutes before a life drawing class. This is so I can make sure that the lighting is set up correctly. It means that I have a good idea of how cold or how warm it's going to be. I can set up the background that I'm going to be using and any of the props. And usually as well, before a life drawing class on Zoom, you'll be logging in about 15 minutes before anyway to have another chat, check on the poses, check on everything that's going to be expected of you in the class, ask any questions. So before you know it, that time can go so fast. You also want to put some things aside, like any kind of water that you might want. Also, if you are going to be muting yourself or you're not going to be muted, you need to have that discussion and prepare for that. If you are going to be muted, you might be putting on a playlist. That can be really nice to do as a life model, because we're not in a room with other people. We don't hear the pencil noises, or the chit chat's not the same. It's kind of a little bit different. It can feel a little bit isolating. As I said earlier, you're mainly confronted with like a version of yourself and you're kind of going from pose to pose. It is a really lovely experience, but it is a little bit different. So having music just can make it just a little bit nicer for you. But you'll need to have that chat with the person who's hosting the class, because they might want you on mute, they might take you off mute so you can say hi. You just want to know how all the audio is going to work. The other thing that really helps if you give yourself time as well is that you can check all of the wires, particularly if you're using a setup like I am, so a Mac, a laptop where I play a playlist, and then a light 1 and a light 2, and I possibly have my phone as well, because especially if I am texting the person, so if the host is talking and waiting for people to come in and I need to get a message, but they have chosen to go by muting everyone so the communication isn't so everyone talking over each other, I might need my phone as well on charge. So that could be 6 or 7 wires, and if I just throw it all together too quick, then I can easily trip over, and the last thing that I want to do is to trip over when I'm moving the Mac from like standing to seated position. So giving yourself a good amount of time to prepare just makes it a lot less like sudden race to get done. The other thing as well is you need to prepare about the timing. You need to prepare that it's a bit longer. So you're going to be setting up for maybe half an hour and maybe more if you want. And certainly after the class, there can sometimes be another 15-30 minutes or more, because people like to use that opportunity to show up their work and they have a chit chat. So again, that's really, really lovely, but prepare for that and have a chat maybe with the person who's hosting the class. I borrow the tech, and initially I was saying, oh, it's a 6 till 7 class, and then I was setting up half an hour before, and then I was chatting half an hour later. So an extra hour was being used. So if, in particular, if you're sharing internet, you're sharing tech, or you're just living with somebody else, it's worth knowing that these classes can sort of like run a little bit differently time-wise. So that's all of my top tips. I haven't covered all of it to any extent, and maybe some of those resonated and maybe some of it you're like, oh, whatever. But anyway, I hope that in general it was helpful, and I wish you all the best with life modelling online. And yeah, just have a great time, make the best of it, and I hope you get lots of lovely classes and make lots of lovely art. Take care for now. Bye.